Okay. Chazak u'baruch on the Dahans, Avi and Mirav. Thank you very, very much for organizing this and for Mirav putting in so much effort. Where is she? Thank you very much, Mrs. Dahan. Thank you very much. It's
Rabbi, thank you so much.
It's too bad the people on the video can't see all the spread. It's too bad for them. It's too bad for them. So the topic that I wanted to share with you tonight is something that is a fascinating topic that we could learn a lot from, and many people are surprised when they hear about this topic. I was learning with Avi this topic yesterday, going through some of the different takanot, and they're not aware at the sense of community that there was in Morocco, and how it would benefit us tremendously if we, as the Jewish community in America or in France or in Israel or whatever, would adopt some of these methodologies that they had and the unity that they had. So I want to tell you like this. In the year 1947, a very special event happened for the first time in history in Morocco. Was that it doesn't matter how the organization, there was somebody called Mr. Boutbol, I think, and he it seems to be that he was a big player, that he was a liaison between the government and the Rabbinic board of Morocco. They got together to form meetings. So it wasn't at the Hyatt or the Marriott. It was in the city of Rabat. It was in the city of Rabat, and they got together for it was 6 different meetings they had for the next 6 years. They got together, and I think they skipped 1 year in 1948. It could be because it was a little bit of a tumultuous time, but they got together, Rabbanim from all the different cities, to go through all of the different halachot and takanot. Takanot are enactments in order to improve the lives of the Jews in Morocco, in order to make sure that things didn't get out of hand, in order to make sure that the halachot were updated, and I would not dare to say to be updated with the times, because halakha doesn't change over times. But sometimes there's different scenarios that change. For example, today I gave a shiur on business and halakha, and how business changes tremendously, especially now. Every year it's a different way how they make business, through the e-commerce and shipping and retail. So there's different halachot that apply because of that. So similarly, because of the different challenges of the times that the Rabbanim were facing, instead of just sitting on their laurels and say, let the chips fall where they may, they were active and they found solutions. And you're going to be fascinated at some of the problems that they were faced with and some of the solutions and the takanot that they did. And it's a big lesson for us, because we could also, the Rabbanim, but it starts also from, it's a grassroots movement, that if people in the communities ask for it and encourage and demand it even, that there should be meetings, and they should be able to, the Rabbanim should be able to have time and resources to come together to organize and have discussions face to face. So many things could be accomplished. And there are organizations that do that, but you'll see what type of organization they had in Morocco. Not only that, they had class pictures. Believe it or not, there's famous pictures of Rabbanim in Morocco. Here's one of them. These were all the Rabbanim in 1949. You see that, I'll just name you some of them. That in the front row you had the chief rabbi in Morocco, then his name was Rabbi Shauli ben Dinan. Next name was Rav Chaim David Serrero. Next to him was Rabbi Michael Ankawa, Rabbi Baruch Toledano, the Rabbi Shimon Kohen. You had Rabbi Machluf Abu Chatzera, Rabbi David Ovadia, who I was zoche to know, Rabbi Yoshua Maman, who also had the zchut of knowing. He was the youngest of the rabbis. He passed away a couple of years ago, and he was a Rav in those conferences. Of course, Rabbi Shalom Misas was there, Rabbi Yosef Misas was there. I'm just naming a few names. Rabbi Yechia ben Arush, Rabbi Yaakov Berdugo, Rabbi Yosef Chaim El Maleh. These were all great Rabbanim in their cities, and each city had its representative. So let me tell you from the beginning. The Sefer that I am reading from, this is called Sefer HaTakanot HaMishpat HaIvri Be'Kehilot Morocco. Basically, what it means is that it was the minutes of the meetings that they had and the resolutions. That's in modern day terminology. It was the minutes of the meetings that they had, and you could even see how they sat by those board meetings. Let me see here. This is how it looked. They sat each one at a table, and they all sat around. So it was very similar to our hotels nowadays when we have conferences. Just we have like maybe more polished tables. So the tables over there weren't as polished, and but it was.
And we have coffee, they had tea, no?
Yeah, we have coffee. They had tea. They had na'ana. They had.
It's just not on the table. They were bringing it to them.
Yeah. Yeah, we didn't have to go get it. They had people bringing it to them. That was the difference. So here we have the subject of the Takanot of Morocco. And let us start with the following.
How were they enforced?
So that's a very important point. I should mention is that the way that the Bet Din worked and works in Morocco till today is that there is a law that the Jews go to their Bet Din, and it's fully enforced. The Muslims go to their courts, and the Jews go to their courts, and it's fully enforced with police and with enforcement, and whatever the Bet Din says is binding. They don't have to sign an arbitration like people do over here when they come to Bet Din, and if they don't sign the arbitration, there's nothing really you can do. They have to go to Bet Din, and they had it enforced. And you didn't mess with the takanot. There was once an example, this is in Israel. This was in Israel already, where Rav Ovadia Yosef signed a very, very harsh takana about schooling, about opening up a certain school that was below par of religious standard, and one of the rabbanim that signed there said that anybody who violates there is going to be excommunicated, and Baba Sali signed his name also. He says, I agree. Because of that Baba Sali saying, I agree, nobody touched that school. Nobody went close to it. Nobody wanted to mess with Baba Sali. Nobody wanted to mess with Baba Sali. So in the year 1947, just imagine what's going on over here. They came together, these Hachamim. It wasn't so many the first year. I'll tell you who was there. There was Rav Chaim David Serrero, the Av Bedin of Fez, Rabbi Rafael Baruch Toledano, the Av Bedin of Meknes, Rabbi Chaim David ben Shushan, who, as I mentioned, I have a friend, Rabbi Ari ben Shushan, Rabbi Dovi ben Shushan, they're grandchildren of Rabbi Chaim David ben Shushan. A lot of people's ketubot that they show me of their parents from Casablanca, he took care of the ketubot department. There was Rabbi Aaron Hassin from Mogador, from Surya. And there was Rabbi Mordechai Lebhar, who was the Chacham of Tangier. And there was Rabbi Shlomo Asaban from Ujda. And then they also had Rabbi Yedidia Monsonego, who was a Chaver Bedinen, Rabbi Shimon HaKohen from Casablanca, and also Rabbi Yosef Misas from Miknes. They didn't have so many Chachamim. You'll see many more Chachamim came in the next years. And the chief rabbi in Morocco then, his name was Rabbi Yeshua Berdugo from Miknes. So a very big Talmid Chacham, very Charif, and he was actually very soft spoken. I shouldn't say Charif in learning, but he was very open minded. We'll call it in a lot of areas, and he was and he started off, but it didn't sound like he felt so well. So this was the first meeting that they had. So I'm going to go through Takanot throughout the years, so you can understand the issues that they were dealing with in those times, Bayamim Ahem Bazman Hazeh, and how they dealt with it. First is the following. It started to become much more of a free environment with the modernization and the secularization. It's a very big challenge for many families, that they saw that usually their daughters would stay at home protected. Their daughters started coming out. When their daughters started coming out, men were coming and were dealing freely with the reality that they could just find a girl and maybe they could they could make her compromise on her status. For those of you who understand what I'm saying. And because of that, the Rabbanim wanted to find a way to protect the daughters of Am Yisrael, that it shouldn't be a society which is hefker, which is just loose and promiscuous without any consequences. If somebody was going to do something, they would have to suffer consequences. So the first takana mamash, suggested by Rabbi Shaul ben Dinan, who was later to be the chief rabbi in Morocco. Later he moved to Eretz Yisrael. It's a very big chatzil to become. His father was already chief rabbi. His father was HaMelech Shlomo ben Dinan. He wrote the Sefer Asher Yishlomo, very important halachic sefer. And this is Rabbi Shaul ben Dinan. He wrote Shirut U'Teshuvat Hagam Shaul. And he says the following. This is the takana that he suggested, which was accepted. That if a person, a lot of times the way a man would seduce a lady, because she knows that if she lost her status of bitula, she's not getting married so easily, and nobody's going to look at her. So what the man would do to seduce her, as we know, men are very dangerous people, and he seduced her and he says, "I promise that I'll marry you." And then he says, "Well, I promise, but." Words are cheap, and he would run off, and that's it. He would leave her alone, and there she is having to suffer the consequences, and he ran off. So the Rabbanim didn't want to let that happen. So first of all, they enforced that anybody who gave such a promise has to follow through with it. It's enforceable. He has to marry her. That's number one. Number two, even if you didn't promise her, you have to get married to her. That's a rule. There was no way out. You were together. Number three, whether she was a bitula or whether she wasn't a bitula, and she got pregnant and she admitted she was pregnant from him, even if she wasn't a bitula, he has to marry her. Number four, don't think that just because you compromised her status, you don't have to give her the full amount of the ketubah. You have to give her a full ketubah because it was your fault. Number five, if you don't want to and you're really against it, you have to pay the amount of 10,000 francs up to 50,000 francs. And if she wasn't a bitula, you have to pay 5,000 to 15,000 to 25,000 francs, all according to what the Dayanim feel is the proper knas. It's funny because this is 1947. In 1954, I think, Rabbi Yoshua Maman, who I had the merit of knowing very well. He lived in Mekor Baruch, right next to the army station there. I don't know if you know in Yerushalayim, there's like this army station by Mekor Baruch. He lived on Rehov Bar Guria, if I'm not mistaken, 17. I would go visit him often. I would ask him questions often. He wrote me letters. He wrote me Askamot to my book. He was a very special dayan. He was the last of the dayanim of Morocco. He was a dayan in Rabat, in later in Yerushalayim. He wrote Shilot U'Teshuvot, Emek Yoshua. Phenomenal person and Talmid Chacham. And he protested. He says that the amount of money is not enough. It's not working. So they actually they upped the ante, and they said that if anybody makes a bitula lose her status, they have to start from 25,000 up to 200,000 franc. I don't know how much that is, Michael. You can help us out over here in those times in 1947 or not?
$3,000.
That's it. In those days.
In those days.
In those days, 3,000.
$3,000 was a lot of
Was
money.
a lot of money.
In Morocco,
And they didn't have money. They would
$3,000 to $4,000.
This was before Amazon. They didn't make money through e-commerce, right? It seems to be that it was a high enough amount that it had to be a deterrent. So that was, if you want to talk about drama, the first instance in the first takana, that's what they did to protect Benot Yisrael, to protect the daughter of Zev Yisrael. Unbelievable. Not only that, we're going to see later there was another takana that a man who commits adultery goes to jail for 3 months.
A Moroccan jail, huh?
A Moroccan jail. Yeah. It wasn't the white collar jail. No, they sent him in the Moroccan dungeon for 3 months. No, he can't. It just doesn't get off just like that. Okay, let's continue. Another important takana that they made then was they saw that Shabbat observance was deteriorating. In Marrakesh already, the Rabbanim spoke about that if people would just take walks on Shabbat afternoon needlessly without going to Shiurei Torah, they would blast them. They would blast them. There's no such thing as not going to Shiurei Torah in the afternoon. But Shabbat started getting even worse than that until eventually they had to make a takana that once a month the Rav had to speak about Shmirat Shabbat. Once a month the Rav had to speak about Shmirat Shabbat, and that was the only way that he'd be able to get it modified. Okay, to get the Shabbat under control. Okay, let's continue to the next takana. (1947), Rabbi Shauli ben Dinan, he was all over this year. The Hilulot were getting out of hand. So here he says the following. There was pilgrimages going on, 1947, in Morocco, all over. And people were going in and out of the cemeteries, camping in the cemeteries, and building things all over, trashing the place, and it was getting totally out of hand. Says the takana the following. Really, truly amazing. Number one, you have to get a license, a permit from the Beit Din in order to make a hilula. Permit from the Beit Din in order to get a hilula. Number two, the Beit Din themselves, the Rabbanim have to make sure that it's going to be a proper setup, and this is how it's going to happen. Number one, the actual kever of the tzaddik, it has to be separate men and ladies, and only one by one they could enter into the place of the kever. I remember I was once by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai on Lag BaOmer. It must be 5-10 years ago, and it's the first time I ever flew, not in an airplane, but from the outside of the kever to the kever. As I'm coming in, these big burly guys, as I'm going through, I notice that my feet are in the air already because I'm being picked up by everybody's body fat, and until I'm getting to the kever, it was like I almost died. It was a human compressor. So they were afraid of that happening. So they said, one by one could come in. Number two is that there should be no tent in the actual kever, because I guess that was cause a lot of people to go through. Anybody who wanted to plant tents, because people would mamash camp out like you see in Meron. That's Moroccans who camps out in Meron. It's Moroccans. So they're used to it from Morocco. Just they
some Hasidim today.
Right? Yeah, because who did they learn? They didn't do it in Galicia where they would freeze. I assure you, they learned it from us. So there has to be. They want to plant tents. Fine, it has to be outside of the area. We have to tell Maurice Azerwal that he doesn't let people plant their tents over there by Rabbi Yitzchak. So number 5, you can't sell any food or drink in the Bet HaKvorot. It has to be outside. And they have a few more hilula. Number 1, if the hilula is on Motzei Shabbat, nobody's allowed to enter beforehand into the area because they were afraid of Hilul Shabbat. So it's fascinating that even the hilulot and the parties, nowadays there are communities who have implemented strict takanot. Communities that are able to do it, like the Hasidim that are tight-knit, so they implement strict takanot that weddings cannot be over a certain amount, because people spend a crazy amount on weddings, and like people who don't have the money feel the social pressure. And this is a little bit of what was going on then also, that there's pandemonium, so the Rabbanim had to step in to modify things. So this is...
Hasidim do it today.
Yes, Hasidim do it till today. There's takanot, but not all Hasidim.
Williamsburg.
Right. Okay, so that was 1947. So there was up until protecting a woman that she shouldn't become promiscuous, that they made sure that if the man it takes advantage of a woman, he has to pay up, or he has to marry her, up to the point of Shabbat and Hilulot. That was 47. 1948, many more Rabbanim came. That's what it seems to be. Many more Rabbanim came. This time, Rabbi Aaron El-Maliach, he was a Dayan in Saleh. El-Maleh, there was Rabbi Chia Ben Arush from Porlite. What do you call that? Porlite. Kenitra, right. In Kenitra. There, he did a lot of conversions. So that's another subject. Rabbi David. Yeah, that's right. Right, okay, that's another discussion. And a lot of the similar Rabbanim that came last time that I mentioned, they also returned. Rabbi Ephraim Ankawa was representing Marrakesh. So Marrakesh didn't have a representation the first year in 1947 for some reason. Huh?
No, you mentioned that Rabbi Kawa was there.
No, it was a different. It was Rabbi Mordechai Lebhar, who was the Av Bedin of Tangiers. But this time they sent somebody from Marrakesh. Marrakesh is a very prominent city. It's surprising they didn't come the first time. Listen, we all know it could be there was fights. No, shut up. I don't know.
Too many rabbis from Meknes, so they couldn't.
Is it possible? No, that's only Meknes in Marrakesh.
Yeah.
But is it possible that the fact that the Rabbanim from Mogador and Marrakesh interchange a lot?
Hope so. I don't know. It could be there was a technical reason that they weren't able to make it. Could be a missed flight. I have no idea. Here we have the Teshuvah of Rabbi Shlomo HaKohen, who was also there. Rabbi Shlomo HaKohen was from the city of Ujda. It's from the city of Ujda. If I'm not mistaken, it's the same Rabbi Shlomo HaKohen who wrote Shelot Utshuvot, Lecha Shlomo. Fascinating Shelot Utshuvot. He talks about taking an airplane on Shabbat. He talks about he talks about the Bet HaKvarot, how Kohanim could go in and out of Bet HaKvarot. He talks about electricity. He talks about very fascinating subjects. I actually wanted to reprint the Sefer over again, and I heard it was done already because I have a great grandson of his who actually lives in Los Angeles in our community. But it was already reprinted, so I let that go. Okay, so we're in the year 1948. I'm just trying to pick the unique takanot that would have we could learn from. One of them was trefot. This was actually a very heated debate. I made a bracha before and I washed some. And thank you. And they discussed over here that every single city had their rules for trefot. And this already, Meknes followed the strict takanot of the Torot Emet of Rabbi Rafael Bertugo. Fez followed their minhagim and takanot. Whenever they were shochet an animal, they had their rules, what's considered a trefa and what's not. Now what happened, if you were invited to a party from Fez to Meknes, no way that you're going to eat by his house, and no way he's going to eat by your house. It's pandemonium. You're going to go, you have a simcha in Casablanca, none of you are going to eat over there, and that one's not going to eat by you, and it's just, it's a pandemonium. So the Hachamim suggested, they had a few meetings on this, by the way, about the trefot. It was a heated inyan, that they make uniform trefot. Everybody agreed but Meknes. I'm not making this up.
Understood.
They were very, very adamant that they have their Sefer Takanot from the Torot Emet, and they're not changing.
It doesn't sound like a Meknes.
I'm sorry? It doesn't sound.
What was the takana? That everybody can eat anywhere?
No. The takanot was that everybody should follow uniform rules of what's called trefot and what's not called trefot. That way you can't accuse the day he's not like my minhag, how can I eat by him?
Right.
Now, this would be amazing if something would happen like that nowadays. Like nowadays in America, it's pretty good because more or less everybody accepts the OU, which is by far the largest hechsher. And Baruch Hashem that the OU is so good in what they do. And the other hechsherim, the smaller ones, which are very big also, which is the Star K, the Yok and the Chav K, they're all very good hechsherim. So I think it's pretty good in America that if you eat by somebody else's house, you're pretty much okay. You don't know. There are details. But by and large, it's not a bad situation.
So
you can find out.
How it works with Bet Yosef. OU does not sell Bet Yosef. I mean, he sells what's his name, Elite, which is kosher by them, not kosher, but
So, since you brought up the subject, I'll answer it quickly regarding Bet Yosef. That in Morocco, when the Megurashim moved to Morocco, I think we spoke about that. They didn't follow Bet Yosef. They were very lenient on how to peel the adhesions of the animal, the sirchot. And in Morocco, that they didn't hold strictly on that, mainly because they had this is where there's a little bit of a discussion. What is nowadays? Because they only had one animal. If they lost that animal, they lost thousands of dollars. They would starve. So it could be they relied on those opinions. But nowadays, you have a choice in the supermarket between Bet Yosef or not. There's no problem in taking Bet Yosef if you want to, and who says you shouldn't be machmir? But I agree that Moroccans are more lenient. Rabbi Shalom Mizas wasn't stringent on the Bet Yosef.
may eat halal.
No, he wasn't. Halak means Bet Yosef. Rabbi Shalom Mizas wasn't concerned about it, even when he knew when it was available. So that was his opinion. It could be others will say, well, that's because it was at a time of difficulty. But it's a long discussion.
Yeah, this whole famous machloket between Rabbi Yitzchak Levuya and Maran when he came to Morocco.
Right. There's on three things, and that was one of them.
Yes.
One of them. Right. Okay. That's the 1948. Let me continue to a few more of the relevant takanot. Here, I gave a shiur in Lakewood on Thursday to very big Talmidei Chachamim, much bigger than myself, on the subject of prenuptial agreements. The prenup. This is a fascinating subject. We know that if a husband and wife, God forbid, separate and divorce, the husband is obligated to give a wife a get. And if he doesn't give a woman a get, she's left in being an aguna. And unfortunately, sometimes there's situations where it's a bitter machloket and divorce. There's different reasons that a husband withholds a get, and a woman is trapped in a very vulnerable situation. So, in the 90s, the RCA, Rabbinic Council of America, proposed to do a prenup. Now, the problem over here is that a man is not allowed to be forced to give a get. It's written in the Torah, it has to be lirtzono, by his own will. It has to be done by his own will. The issue being, and this is where it gets very sensitive, the issue is that how you get a man to give a get through his own will, par volonté, and without forcing him. So how can you do that? So the RCA thought of the following solution, which is the following. A husband is obligated to support his wife. There's certain obligations that a husband has towards his wife, and certain obligations that a wife has towards the husband. He is obligated to support her. She is obligated on her earnings to give to her husband. That's the ma'asiyadea to him. Now, it doesn't mean her properties that came into the marriage belong to the husband. That's called that remains. She brings in hotels or whatever else, it's hers. That's called nechse melug, nechse tzon barzel. But he is obligated to support her. What happens when they're separated? So he shouldn't be obligated to support her anymore because she's keeping whatever she's earning for herself and he's on his own. So the RCA suggested, based on a certain commentary of the Torah Gitin, the Netivot HaMishpat, that as long as the husband obligates himself to support her, despite the fact that she's in her own house, then he has to sign that he's willing to obligate to support her. How much is support in nowadays? This is what they calculated. Nowadays society, $150 a day. $150 a day. He has to support her. That's $54,000 a year. Some people say it's too much. Some people say it's too little. It depends where you come from. But it's definitely an incentive for the husband not to hold back. Now, if the guy's a Rasha and he wants he has a lot of money, so he'll say, I'll pay the 54, but it usually doesn't work that way. It usually doesn't work that way. Usually, it's a good system that the husband signs the prenup, and the RCA was very happy with this prenup, and they endorsed it, and they are using it heavily. So once again, you're not forcing the husband to give the guy. I bet you there's a good joke over here. You're not forcing the husband to give the get. You're forcing him to pay support, which he'd be obligated to anyways. Yes.
A religious question. Prenup is
not financial.
No, a prenup usually, as far as I understand, is what you agree with coming into the marriage and what is for us to come, and not what are my obligation. Then it's only in the ketubah. What does it do?
Right. So it's a borrowed term. The secular prenup is when people come into a marriage and they don't want their assets from previous times to be split, so they make a financial. I'm not talking about that at all. I'm using a borrowed term that the husband and wife sign, that if chas v'shalom there was ever be problems in the future, he's obligated to support her $150 a day, even if they are divorced civilly or living separately. And that's usually an incentive for him to give a get to his wife. It turns out that in Morocco, in the fifth rabbinical meeting in 1954, the Hachamim already had that implemented that solution. This original solution that the RCA had, it was already written in the Takanot of Morocco. And I said to some of the Dayanim, I showed them that it was done in Morocco already. The Takana was, at the time of their marriage, they should agree that he has to give her parnasa as long as they are religiously married, even though they are civilly separated. And they did that. They implemented that prenup. Rabbi Shalom Misas was asked and he was challenged, and he defended it. So what I spoke about on Thursday, I actually presented this to the group of Dayanim. It's obviously very impressive how people don't know about the Hachamim of Morocco and how they thought of all these problems that so many years later people found solutions. It was already being implemented by the Takanot of Morocco. And this is not the only one. You'll see there's many more very interesting Takanot. It turns out that there's another prenup nowadays that has certain halachic advantages to it. That's what I was speaking about on Thursday. And it's something that just came out mamash last month from the Yashar Coalition. It's a little bit of a different structure. It's not a shiur on prenups, but it's something that has to do with our takanot. It was so interesting.
So was it the takanot that when we go to Moroccan weddings? I mean, but the real ones, they announce the amounts, of the ketubah. Is that what we're talking about?
No, that has nothing to do with it. The ketubah, they also made takanot that the ketubah shouldn't be exaggerated. They also made the ketubah check. Sometimes you say, I've seen this many times. My daughter, she's only worth this. She's only worth that. It was like nobody. Nobody knows what they're signing, why they're signing it. Yes.
But in Morocco, you don't see too much divorce. When
Baruch Hashem, they were starting to see more, unfortunately.
No, when the husband and the wife fight, they go to Dayan, and Dayan make peace for them.
Yes.
Them home. Here,
that is the number one thing to do, and I'm sure they did that.
The Eidim is ready. They go in and they're out.
But I'm going to tell you a surprising piece of information.
Yeah.
You probably don't know this, but some Moroccan people have tempers. It's a rare occurrence. It's a rare occurrence. It's a rare occurrence, but some of them have tempers. And it could be they lose their minds and they do things that are irrational.
Okay, but
so that's what we want to prevent. Even one aguna, we want to protect. And it was impressive how they implemented this. Remember, everything was done through the bedin. There was no going to secular court. They had full authority. It's very different than we have nowadays. Okay.
So what was the amount then? How different was it from the prenup?
It's the exact same thing.
It was the same thing, right?
It doesn't. It doesn't say the amount of $150. It was whatever bedin decided what the support was.
So in case of divorce, he's going to support her and give her the ketubah.
Yeah, you have to give her the ketubah, of course. Ketubah, he has to.
Right.
If he,
No,
if
I'm
he, if
saying-
he doesn't give the ketubah, if he separates from her, he needs to support her.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Well, it's
So
the
he just, in other words, he's not obligated to give it a get, and if not, he's going to get a penalty of $500 because, then he's forced to be giving get. He's just forced to keep his Torah obligation. We're not telling you to give you a get. Forcing you to keep your obligation.
when he stopped giving the money, he has to give the get. Based on this.
When he gives the get, he doesn't have to pay the money anymore of support. And he has to pay her the ketubah. He has to pay her the ketubah. Okay? Next. First of all, everything was very official. If you notice that the ketubot had a picture of the man and wife. You ever saw that by the certain ketubot?
Only
It was
now, in Eretz Yisrael they had.
in Casablanca and from the 1950s and on. That was the takana from Marrakesh, from Rabbi Ephraim Ankawa. It was more documented. It was. You have to understand, this was the money that the woman got. Nowadays, the ketubot are not enforced so much because people figure out that amount in court. But in those days, it was the amount of ketubah that the woman got, and it was used. So it was much more. They were much more careful on how it was recorded properly. Okay. Let's continue a few more, and then we'll have questions. This is a big one. According to Torah law, the boys inherit, and the daughters do not inherit. That is according to Torah law. What Rabbi Shalom Misas suggested, the reason why it was like this was because in previous generations, brothers took responsibility on the family. And if, God forbid, the father or the mother, the father and the mother died, so the brother would be in charge of the family, and he would support the daughters, he would support his sisters, until they got married, which their husband would support them. That was the proper family structure. Things changed. Boys weren't taking care of their sisters. It seemed to be that they were just getting an unfair advantage. So the Moroccan Hachamim got together and they made a takana that the daughters should get a Yerusha as well. הבת הנשואה תירש באביה באמה חלק עם הזכרים או עם הזכרים והנקבות שאינם נשואות. The daughters also got a portion.
How can they uproot
This is a famous question. How could they uproot the Oraita? So the truth is, by many Ashkenazi communities and Sephardi communities for that matter nowadays, there's something called a halachic will, and it's something very important to do. What it is that there's a halachic way how a person could bequeath his wealth to his sons and to his daughters equally. I spoke to one of the sons of one of the great tzaddikim and poskim of America, and I asked him how his father split the wealth. And his father, what the father did was that he left $900 or something that should be split only to the boys and not to the girls to fulfill, quote unquote, the inyan of the Torah. Wasn't so sure there is something like that or not. And the wealth, whatever wealth he left over, a house, an apartment, was split equally amongst the children, which is the proper thing to do nowadays. You're listening to me clearly. The proper thing of Yerusha is that to avoid any machlok is that the Bechor doesn't take a double. All the children split equally. It's at different times, at different generations. And if you're asking why is that uprooting the kavanah of the Torah, it's a question that many people ask. They say as long as the Bechor, someone is getting something, it's not called uprooting the Torah. As long as he's getting something. And it's not that you are not following the Torah, because this is the problem. If the father dies and doesn't leave a halachic will, and the children don't get along, and the son says, well, I want everything, he has a right, according to halacha. Which is why it's so important for somebody to properly make a will beforehand. And there's ways how to do with a halachic will. The best is to get a religious estate planning lawyer that knows how to do the contracts. Just one form, and that's it. To split things up evenly. If one thing you remember from this shiur, this is an important thing to do for planning. It should be ad 120, but that way things are done equal. In Morocco, they circumvented that because they had the power of the takana of the betin. So Michael is asking over here, how could the betin uproot something in the Torah? You didn't sign a halachic will, because halachic will, the way it works is that you're bequeathing it a minute before a person dies. A minute before a person dies. So it's not really, but they didn't do that. They just made a takana, but they made a takana. It's the boy's money, it's not the girl's money. It's a very good question. The answer is that there's a concept called hefker betin hefker. That the Beddin has the right to say we have a control on your money in certain areas, and that's what they did over here. It was a very strong takana. This was probably the strongest out of all other takanot, that they made equal inheritance. This was done in 1953, I believe.
Who installed this?
This was the suggestion of Rabbi Michael Ankawa from Tangiers, and it went back and forth because some Chachamim asked that it's going uprooting something that's in the Torah until they agreed at the end that it was fine, and they said that since Hefker Bedin Hefker and other reasons. Okay, they also discussed schooling, and they had an accounting. This is the Excel spreadsheet that they had right here, and they had accounting exactly what schools there were in that time. I just opened up to the page of Sufru. They had Imma Banim had 12 classes. Yeshivat Bet David had 2. They had 11 night classes, like Kololim night classes, and 1 girls' school, Bet Rivka, that was run by Chabad, it looks like. Says exactly how much they paid the teachers for the night classes also. Says where they got the money from, how much they got from outside money, from Otzarat Torah, from Kol Yisrael Chaverim, which is Alliance. They, how much to feed the students, medical help for them, clothing, how many hours of French, how many students. There was 296 students then in Sifru. What diploma the teachers had, and what their salary was. You have this for Miknes, for Fez. Actually, Miknes was the same size as Fez. I thought it was going to be very interesting.
Rabbi, what is this book you're looking for?
This is called Sefer Takanot Mishpat Ivri, written by Rabbi Moshe Amar. It's a very special person. He is a professor in these subjects in Bar Ilan University and puts out a lot of manuscripts and kitavim. Who by far the biggest was Derbida, which is Casablanca. They had a lot of Imma Banim had.
What was the takana they did?
Well, everybody.
Actually, it wasn't so much.
Everybody was pouring into Casablanca from everywhere.
Yeah. Okay, it wasn't that
Rabbi,
much
but
bigger.
what was the takana they did this with?
No, there's no takana. There was just accounting.
Okay.
There was just. I'm sure they made takanot on it. I didn't see this time about the takanot, but it says even Midelt, which is a very small city. Have you ever passed by Midelt? It's like so yeah, it's a Rabbi Shlomo Amsterdam, right? It was how many? 5 students. No, 120 students. I'm sorry, and 5 classes between 4 and 13 years old. They would learn Chumash, Dinim, Chok Yisrael, Hebrew. Okay, fine. Interesting. That's interesting. Well, I was about to skip over that, but it was interesting to see that they had accountings in their board meetings. They made sure that the mikvaot were up to date. And the last subject that I'm just gonna mention now, which is an interesting halachic subject that first of all, they made sure that a girl is not allowed to get married before 15 years old. We all know our grandmothers, great-grandmothers, she got married when she was 11 years old, when she was 9, when she was playing in the yard, they brought her in. And it was a problem because the girls would not get pregnant. They couldn't get pregnant early, a lot of them. And it was if they did get pregnant, it was dangerous. So the Chachamim stopped it, and they said, it could be it worked then for whatever reasons, but they said 15 years old. Nowadays, I think we've made the takana a little bit older, I would assume, but that's the takana that they made then. I don't think we need to make a takana. I don't think it's a major, except it's an aberration. It's usually not a problem, but in those days, they stepped in for that. Last thing is that they made sure that once a couple got engaged, they would get married within 6 months. They would get married within 6 months. And I'll tell you the last thing that and with this I'm going to end, and I'm more than happy to hear questions on this.